everyone should have a punk band. And I'll explain more of what I mean throughout the episode. The purpose of this episode is going to be to explain some tactics and strategies to combat what Steven Pressfield calls resistance. And for anyone who's unfamiliar with Steven Pressfield, you should go buy one or all of his books on the craft of writing immediately. The most notable one being The War of Art and or Turning Pro. Those two books are a must-read for any creative person at any point of their journey. If you just bought a guitar, you should buy Steven Pressfield's book, those two books, War of Art and Turning Pro. If you, like I said, if you know 3 chords on the guitar, you are ready to start a band, and you should be reading those books because you are now a creative. And that's what I'm actually going to be trying to articulate and dive into at this point. Now, because I'm just starting off this podcast, I am flying solo here, and that's not what I'd really like to do 9 times out of 10 here. But all my friends are busy, and I'm trying to embody my own medicine. I'm trying to take my own medicine here in the sense that I believe that creativity should be done fast and without a lot of thought. I think that the creative person's life needs to be split into extreme discipline and extreme undiscipline. And the natural tendency is for most creative people to operate somewhere in between. So I'm kind of a rock and roll guy, and so I just play guitar and sing primarily. I mean, I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of bass, a little bit of drums, a little bit of, I guess, production, you could say. But really, I just sing and play guitar loudly. And where I'm going with this is I'm trying to take my own medicine that creativity should be, on one hand, extremely focused and disciplined. So I think the more that a person could sit down and say, all right, I'm going to focus on a specific weakness for a specific allotment of time and try and tackle this weakness in a methodical way and hold myself accountable to those results. So that would be, let's say you want to practice a certain lick in 12 keys or a scale in 12 keys. You would have to learn the scale, and then you'd have to sit down and do it a key at a time. And what that might actually mean, depending on your level of, progress, it might mean that you do a very, very small chunk that day, and you just play 2 keys today, and you just switch back and forth between those keys. But you actually do it, and you make sure that that you're facing something that you have not faced before, as far as you're actually facing a weakness instead of, I think what's very common, and I obviously am speaking here from incredible experience and as someone who has spent way too much time doing this exact thing, okay? Essentially, telling yourself you're practicing when you're not, because really what practicing is, if you think about it, you are training, you are equipping yourself for the future game of creativity. And I would say that there are different arenas in which creativity is manifest. So one of those, and obviously the focus of this podcast, is songwriting. So that is a reason to practice, is you want to be able to have control over the tools of music to make it so that you can tell a story in a song, if that is the goal. Now, the other avenues would be improvisation, and that can be that. I think my personal opinion, problem I have with that term is that it has an erudite, an off-putting connotation, and I still cower away from it at times, because improvisation has always had a sort of a jazz connotation to it, which can just be intimidating. And then intimidation a lot of times leads to procrastination and doing nothing. So instead of doing something okay, you do nothing because you know you can't match up to the standards that you have, the ideal that you have placed before you mentally. And so I think that this topic of resistance, tackling it and whatnot, that will be a persistent theme through the course of this podcast. And again, got to tip the hat to Stephen Pressfield. He has changed the world as far as he has put names. He has essentially created a lexicon that describes the inner world of every creative person. And it's so wonderful to read those books because you literally laugh out loud when you read them. If you've ever tried to create anything, you start to laugh out loud sometimes in his book. And they're short books, by the way. So there's no excuse not to seek them out with urgency. But that's what I found happens is he names these things and you're like, oh my God, he just named such a specific set of actions that I have taken so many times. And essentially what he talks about is this. There's this enemy that every creative person faces where you have this drive to be a creator, and then there's this usually equal and often stronger drive of, I don't remember what he calls it, but, well, first of all, he calls it resistance, but it also manifests itself a lot of times in the inner critic. So that is this voice that's inside of you that says, basically anything that gives you any variety of negative emotions, right? So anger, fear, self-doubt, depression, anxiety, any of those things is different for everyone, where there's negative emotions that then make you stop. And you feel bad and you're like, well, you feel bad and you're just like, okay, and you just put the guitar down or you just put it off for another day and you don't tackle the creative battle that faces you today. And he uses the term he uses for the title of one of these books I'm talking about is the war of art. It's a war. It's a battle. It is something that is it's violent. There's an actual, and he talks about it in spiritual terms. He uses a lot of analogies of like Greek gods and goddesses, and he talks about the muse a lot. So here's essentially what he says. You as a creative person, you sit down to try and create, and then inevitably resistance will set in. And resistance, I described how it can come from within, but it also comes from without. So coming from without would be as soon as you sit down with the guitar to start writing a song, the phone rings. And you're like, oh, who is that? And so that's a form of external resistance. Or as soon as you sit down, then you're like, oh, I should get a cup of coffee. And on one hand, maybe you should get a cup of coffee. Like I think some of those rituals do help aiding in the creative process. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like it's you do know what I'm saying. If you've ever tried to literally do basically anything productive at all, you sit down and distractions just start to pop up. Or even like a lot of times you start to get like horny, you start to, it's just your body and your mind starts to resist you. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then the feeling of horniness of like, oh, and your mind is wandering and you get kind of wound up and you start to, but then you're totally in a different emotional state instead of trying to be productive and creative. I mean, I suppose that could be an asset if you are writing a song about perhaps a more arousing subject. But even then, I would argue that getting those are different energetic states that aren't usually conducive to each other. And that's just my take on it. Other people might not agree there. But the point is that it is a war. And so he talks about what you aspire to do as a creative is you aspire to sit down And so then as soon as you do, there is resistance from within and from without. And if you can push through it, then the reward is often that a force called the muse comes to greet you. And that muse is, he speaks of this with a very reverential tone, and I think rightfully so, because the longer you are on your own creative journey, what you'll find, I think any creative person who is not a complete head up their bum psycho can relate to the following, that sometimes it feels like you are more of a channel than you are doing. It feels more like you are a passenger than you are the driver. And more like you're an observer. You're a conduit. And creatives have talked about this since the beginning of time, and that is why Pressfield uses especially this Greek god imagery, because it's these themes have just existed for a long time. And so even this topic of the muse, this was the Greeks' way of articulating this sentiment. And it's amazing. I just think that it's one of the that's a lot of the reason I wanted to start doing this podcast, is because it's universally relatable. If you are a creative, you know what I'm talking about, no matter what you do. And so obviously, because I basically write rock music, that's how that manifests for me. And that's, since I have domain expertise, that's the lion's share of what we're going to be talking about here. But the point is, that is the general arc of what Pressfield calls the War of Art. And I realize that maybe I'm doing a bit of a spoiler alert, but the book is so perfect that this is just an outline, right? You still need to read it. But that is the general arc, right? Basically, it's hard enough to sit down for the creative act. It's its own win. If you sit down with your instrument and you turn off the phone and you turn off the computer, except for maybe the thesaurus page, or the rhymer dictionary, you are like, that is a win. You should give yourself a big old W on your personal chart, a star on your star chart for that day, because just sitting down to do that is a win. And it's hard enough. And if you've tried to be creative enough, you know how hard it is, and how many infinite permutations, infinite variables there are to throw you off the path. And he talks about this too. He's like, well, I mean, it's just crazy. Like I said, it might be that the phone rings, right? And then you're like, oh, I need to get this. And he says, you need to start thinking differently. You need to think, this is the enemy, right? Even though it might be your best friend. That best friend at that time is your enemy, because you have this creative drive. Your creative work will not become an actual thing if you don't do the work, which, what do you know? I think that's another one of his book names, by the way. But your creative art, it will not manifest if you don't sit and make the art. But making the art is hard. And it's hard in a way that is basically, if you try to describe this to people who haven't tried it, most people will just, pick your pejorative. They will be like, oh, yeah, okay, sorry about your first world problems, bro. I'm sorry to hear that it's so hard to sit down with your guitar, but it is. And and I think that's even where a lot of the self-destructive artist archetype comes from. And obviously Pressfield acknowledges this too. That resistance is such a palpable and strong force that the lengths to, like, it's almost like the stronger your creative drive is, the stronger the resistance is. The more there's something in you that wants to manifest in art, the more bullshit comes into your life to keep you from doing it. It's just universal and constant. And, if you're a creative, like, and you hang out with other, artists, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And even if you're not, you've watched music documentaries, you know about the 27 Club. Everyone does. And it's just a thing. It's a law of human nature. It's not a negotiable. It is a given. And Pressfield talks about it. He says, that's why you need to anticipate this force being there. You need to anticipate it every day. You need to know you're going to war every day. Now, the fruits of it are literally becoming an artist. You can't become an artist if you don't make art. And you can't make art if you don't sit down to do the art. And you can't make art without skill. And skill is cultivated through time and repetition. It's simple, but not easy, as are probably most profoundly true things, right? Well, this is what brings me around into today's topic. So my buddy Hunter, who will be an inevitable feature of this podcast because he has no choice. I've known Hunter for at least 5 years, and we are in a manner of speaking, we are creative soulmates. So we've been in an original hard rock project that's called Celia, and Celia is done. So it's we started writing the songs in 2016. I think started playing shows in 2017, and it was over by late 2019. And it's funny because we actually talked about how Hunter and I have actually kind of always seen eye to eye on this. I don't think it's actually an emotionally or spiritually healthy place to start a band and plan on it lasting any longer than a year or two. I don't think that you should. If you're going to sit down and start a band and set and list out a bunch of goals. By the way, I have done this before. I have done this when I was quite a bit younger and been like, all right, well, here's how to reverse engineer being on the Lollapalooza stage in 3 years. And there might be some people that are like way more disciplined and just badass than me that could actually execute through that and make it happen. In fact, I'm positive there's plenty of people that have actually done that. So if you want to do that, and if you are a stud, then by all means do that. But what I found in my own life is sometimes setting those goals that are that astronomically high, it gets down to, you end up facing way more resistance, which takes all the fun out of it and actually sucks your drive on a day-to-day basis to progress in the incremental ways that could theoretically get you there anyways. Do you understand that? That when you set a bar so high, a goal so like imperceptibly high, there's a part in like the subconscious where you just don't believe it. And so I mean, there might be even ways to hack that. And I have in my own way tried those. By the way, I have tried meditation. I've tried incantations, saying like, I am a shred lord. I am a, like trying to brainwash myself into overcoming my limitations. And the problem is I find that all that it's ever done for me is just depress me. And sometimes the other thing it'll do is it might give you a temporary positive emotional boost, actually. But it gives you this cheap high where you actually feel these good emotions, but you haven't done anything. You haven't actually sat down, faced resistance, and made a thing. You haven't fucking done any art. And so that's the issue is sometimes you can sit there, like you can look yourself in the mirror. And by the way, I've literally done this. I mean, not that often, but I've done it a few times where I'm like, pointing at myself like that famous recruitment poster, like, you have what it takes. You're amazing. And like, I've tried to do that, but I mean, I'm definitely I have a very strong sense of corniness. I love campy everything, but there's still something in me that knows that is so corny, and that's never been successful for me. Now, I also do think maybe if I like did that on an ayahuasca trip, that it might literally like open some paradigms for me. But I haven't done a bunch of like psychedelics, because honestly, I've been afraid that I'm dumb enough already, and I already have a bad enough memory that I'm like, dude, I need to roll the dice. Anywho, okay, so that is, so I was talking about Hunter, and, so him and we talked about, I think you should just like make a band, and you decide when you make a band, when you want it to be done. You essentially set a deadline for the band, and then if you get to the deadline, you're like, okay, let's push back the deadline. I don't know. I think that's actually pretty amazing. I think it's pretty creative. We essentially, we had this band called Celia, and, nothing really came of it. I mean, we played a couple cool shows. We opened up for Jonathan Davis, the singer from Korn, once. That was probably a highlight. A couple other bands we opened up for that were cool. So it was a great ride. Got on, the local radio station in our area, and, and that was an amazing experience. Those are amazing people. I mean, it was a great, wonderful experience. But then the wheels just started to kind of fall off, and the personnel wasn't working out, and that's a long story, maybe for another day. But so I don't know if it's going to reform. But what's happened is I wrote a bunch of music that would theoretically be for Celia, but I don't know if I actually want to put it in the Celia vehicle. We have to like reimagine it, is what I'm saying, and it hasn't been reimagined because we're still in this COVID shenanigans. So it's just not that pressing to figure some of these things out. But they will get sorted. And Hunter and I, him and I weren't getting along very well, even though we've basically been, if not best friends, very close friends for years. We really had a rough patch in the last, about a year ago. I don't know, last winter. And we weren't really talking to each other, and I kind of thought like maybe this was the end. And then it just sort of happened where we, just like with that toxic ex-girlfriend, you get the text in the middle of the night. I'm kidding, kind of. But so then I hit him up, and we started talking about music again, and one thing led to another. And one of the things that happened is we had a bunch of music that it was on our to-do list, and it just didn't get done. It didn't get written. It didn't get shipped. There wasn't a deadline. There wasn't urgency. We didn't fight resistance. And I, as the primary songwriter, didn't nut up and do my creative diligence. That's one of my greatest regrets from that project is it did not, we weren't prolific enough. We put out about, I don't know, 7 songs or something on Spotify. I don't know. And so that is actually bringing me back around to this topic today, which is starting a punk band. So one of the things is Hunter texted me the other day, and he's like, I want to start a punk band. I really like some of this like 70s punk. And he was alluding to like the Misfits and the Damned. And since I'm kind of a basic bro, I was not familiar with some of these more niche artists. I mean, I'd heard them a few times, but it's never been like something I've sat down to do focused listening on. Well, I thought to myself, what if, I don't know, for some reason it just sounded like a lot of fun to do a punk band. And I thought to myself, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to sit down at this moment and start to make it real. And so I sat down and I wrote a bunch of music, and I was like, well, it's punk, so it can suck. It can suck. Because my normal threshold is when I write a song, I like to flesh out a lot of it. As in, I write the guitars. I write a bass part. It doesn't have to, the quote final version doesn't have to be my bass part, but it's the outline so that because what I've found is a lot of times when I give a fellow musician a recording, like if I say to a fellow musician, here, I want you to be in my band and play my song, the better that demo sounds, the more motivated they tend to be. So that's why I will usually, when I make a demo, I'll like sketch out drums, I'll sit and I'll program drums, right? So you're punching in every little piece of MIDI. And sometimes it can take forever and be a grind. And particularly because I'm not a very proficient drummer, it can just be a real grind, because I don't think fluidly in drumese. And but again, I found that's another form of resistance. A lot of these songs that when my last band with Hunter broke up, a lot of our songs that didn't ever see the light of day, didn't get recorded, didn't get written, didn't get whatever, is because I set the bar where I'm like, oh God, I gotta write drums. It literally was like, oh, I gotta write drums. So I'm just not even, and then you just put it off. And but that's part of it. I think that the 80-20 rule, which for those who are unfamiliar, the 80-20 rule is just, it's called the Pareto principle, and it means that you get 80% of your results from 20% of your actions, and vice versa. 80% of your, or basically like 80% of your life is full of bullshit by comparison. So the more that you can maximize that 20%, the gains will compound in your life. But what that means in a songwriting context, right, is essentially that like you will get, like I would say 80% of doing music is fun and 20% of it's grind. And the grind is different for every person. I would say sometimes the grind is in writing lyrics. Lyrics can be extremely arduous and meticulous if you're more of like an instrumentalist person. Or, like I said, sometimes it's the music is a grind. So for me, programming drums is a complete arduous chore. Sometimes that's writing lyrics. A lot of times that's writing guitar leads because I love like Joe Satriani and Marty Friedman and just like, virtuosic hard rock guys. That is to me the gold standard. And Django Reinhardt and Wes Montgomery, like dudes, just dudes that are the best. I've always loved that. And yet I put my standards there. So I'm like, oh God, well now I need to write a solo. That's amazing. But then a lot of times it means I don't do it. Or it means I write songs where it's like, oh, it's 90% done because it still needs a guitar solo and it, but you don't sit down to do it. And so Hunter hit me up and he said we should start a punk band. And so I sat down and I wrote like 8 songs in 3 days. And they weren't that good. And Hunter listened to all of them. I sent it to him in a cloud folder. He listened to them all and he liked, I think, 6 of the 8. And that's not bad. Now, the thing is, these songs were like really rough, as in GarageBand in, the Apple program has this amazing function where there's this drummer that like that is this form of like AI where you set the tempo and then this drummer will just start playing and you can play along to this drummer. And then it's a pretty intuitive and pretty easy thing to get it to just arbitrarily switch grooves. And it's a really nice creative tool. It really helps for workflow. So, anyways, that's, I found myself, I just like played along to this GarageBand drummer with one guitar track, just shot from the hip on that stuff. And then the lyrics, I listened to a ton of Blink-182 and Green Day when I was young. That is why I started playing the guitar and playing music, because of how much I loved that music. So what I found is that like potty mouth punk just effervesced when I sat down to write it. And it was extremely fun. And so I'm going to play one or two of those tunes coming up here, but to finish this thought, there's apparently a sentiment or there was like a poster, I think, in the fabled New York club scene or something like that, and someone drew 3 chord diagrams. I think it was like a G, C, and a D. They drew 3 chord diagrams on this poster, and then it says, "Now start a band. Here's 3 chords. Now start a band." And that is like the essence of what punk is. And the incredible, beautiful thing about that is it takes away so much resistance if you're like, okay, I'm starting a punk band. Now, I think there's a few other genres that are like this, by the way. I think the genre called lo-fi, and like lo-fi, because lo-fi could mean anything. Lo-fi literally just means low fidelity, as in shitty recordings, or garage. I think garage is another catch-all term of the name, like, oh, we're a garage band. Like, if you describe that, that implies something. And it implies that this is like rough. This is unpolished. Now, some of the best bands of the last few generations have been those bands, or have at least had those origins. The Black Keys, I think, call themselves a garage band to this day. White Stripes, I know, called themselves like a dirty punk band or like a garage band. Garage rock. And, there's all kinds of like indie music that calls itself lo-fi. And then I also think like a lot of underground metal is in that category too. I'm not hardcore enough to roll in those circles. So anyways, the thing is, I think in the modern era, we face a unique, situation as creators where the tools become more and more powerful. The tools that you have as an individual become more and more powerful, as in you can create stuff from your bedroom that theoretically is on an A-list level. And, the primary artist that comes to mind at this point, at the time of this recording, would be Billie Eilish, winning a Grammy, I believe, or multiple Grammys for her record that was produced in her bedroom with her brother, or by her brother. And I mean, that's amazing. Now, I think part of it is if you do like instrumental music, I think it's a little bit of a different game where, if you're making music that is that sort of minimalist, I'm sure there's a proper name for it, but I would say from Lorde, 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 the Royals, Phenom, and Billie Eilish, I would say like that. I always, in my 30-something brain, I sort that in all the same genre of like minimalist reverb pop. And then there's like shades of hip hop. Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of a better way to describe what that is. But anyways, the point is, I think there's certain genres that can be A-list level producing in your bedroom, but I also think that's easier said than done. And I think that trips a lot of people up, myself included. As far as I'm like, oh well, because you can theoretically make an A-list produced record in your bedroom, then it feels like you should. Like the bar has been raised there, right? And I think that's the catch-22 of all these modern tools. It's like, well, that it's possible now to like get a camera, a nice quality camera as an average Joe, and make incredibly visually rich content and put on, rich graphics and put, what I'm saying is I felt this for a long time, that there is this freaking, it's been annoying me of like, and particularly certain spaces on the internet. And I think certain people that mean well say that you should put out really high quality content. Like, that you need really high, like if you want to be taken seriously as a quote professional, you need to put out really high quality content, and because you can, you should, because you can now, because in theory, everyone now has to. And the thing is, I think that is objectively true. I think it's objectively right on And then all the people who say that, especially people that are like industry insiders, I would, by the way, not count myself as one. I have made a very small amount of money from music ever. So I would not count myself that. But I would count myself as someone who's passionate and who knows that as long as I am on this earth, I will be a creative and that I will be exploring creativity, particularly through music in some way. So anyways, I feel like that's a burden on people of, well, because you can, you should now. And here's the way that manifests for me in my last project. And here's why it was a problem. So in this band I was in, it's like, okay, well, we could go and record a professional level product at a professional studio. We could go pay, someone whose actual job it is to make bands sound good. We could go pay them $500 to $1,000, a day. And that seems, by the way, to be the going rate from at least the level I'm at for like a basic professional job. And obviously the sky's the limit on that. But so anyways, to me, it was always this issue of, okay, well, so then there's that. And then there's, if you hire a video guy, which for me, I always felt like I wanted to do that, partially because I didn't have the gear. So it's like, I could give $200 to one of my good buddies, whose passion is making videos. And then it's a win-win, right? So he gets some money and he gets to like build up his personal brand or whatever. And then I get to, have this video. And particularly, I don't have to go through the arduousness of editing my own content and all that shit. But here's the problem that I faced time and again is what that means then is if you want to release a song in any sort of quote proper way, you need to spend $700 a song minimum I would argue for a minimum viable professional rock song. You need to spend $700. And that is for me, getting, I believe, a homie hookup with both the guy I usually go to with recording. Shout out to Dylan Fance in Woodinville, Washington, of One Shot Studios, BT Dubs. And then Ryan Healy is a buddy locally, and he has this video shenanigans that he calls Hemp Films, and that's the name for his video production entity. The point is, hit up my homies and, to go do that. And it's like, well, okay, $700. That is something where that's a significant amount of money for the amount of money that I make, because I've always been like a bartender and, and particularly the reason I've been a bartender is because I've always wanted to be able to have the flexibility to go pursue artistic stuff. And obviously, I found plenty of time for drinking and other tomfoolery, which is a topic for another day, by the way. I actually view that as a form of resistance at this point in my life of like, it's one of the hard things. It's like a lot of times music takes place in what is like a party atmosphere, and the party atmosphere can very quickly be something that is an impediment to creativity. But anyways, the point is, it's a lot of money for me. And then I found that it meant like, oh, well, I always found that it was like this barrier of, oh, great. Well, now we need to save up for another song, and now we need to, scrimp and save. And then, I don't know. It just, now I understand that there's probably a lot of people that are like, well, there's all kinds of people that could say, like, well, it sounds like you were on the right track and you just didn't figure it out, or you just didn't try hard enough. Or, bottom line is, your shit was not good enough. Like, there's a lot of bands that put $500 into a nice music video for a really good song, and that actually, like, creates the first kernel of momentum that takes them all the way to headlining the writing festival. And so I understand that I'm sure there are plenty of people that are like, that could call BS on what I'm saying here. But the point I am making is, in my own journey, what it has meant is it's created resistance. It's created resistance, and by that I mean it's created procrastination. And so, to me, the money was a form of external resistance of like, oh man, that's a lot of money, and particularly it just felt like it was this bottomless pit. It felt like, oh man, there's another, it almost. I actually think what ended up happening is I ended up not writing a lot of songs because I almost knew, like, I don't have the money to go record them. And there was something almost disheartening about that. So I don't think I wrote as much as I could have or should have. By the way, another workaround for this is having someone with a really good job in your band who loves your shit. They will bankroll it. But that was not the case in my last project. All right, so getting back around to it, I think every artist at any level should start a project that they themselves say, this is my punk band, this is my lo-fi band, this is my garage band. And I think it's a useful mental tool for any songwriter, like to have a junk bin, to have your project that is throw anything at the wall and anything goes. Anything is good. The benchmark for if it's good is, did you make noise in any form? Then it was art and it was good. And the thing is, if you're into, say, music like technical guitar rock, right? That is a very precise form of music that requires a lot of dedication to get to that level. And so that's why this has been really hard for me, is like, I like this music that is just, that requires, basically mastery. And so then I found that, like, it creates this perfectionism, and then it takes a lot of the fun out of it. And when the fun's out of it, when you lose momentum. When you don't have momentum, you're not making art. You're not an artist. You're not growing, and you're getting in your own way. That's resistance. So I guess I only started this punk project like literally a week and a half ago is when I started writing these songs. And it was just this amazing relief valve, because what happens mentally is you change the game that you're usually playing with music. You're changing the rules. The rules are, if it makes noise, it's good, period. And it's supposed to be shitty. The name of the genre means shit. We're a garage band. For anyone who knows anything about, what these names mean, they know, like, oh, it's probably shitty. But there are good shitty bands. There are, you know what I'm saying? The Black Keys is a good garage band. The White Stripes is a good garage band. Like, it's possible to be good, but in a way, it's like, that's not even the point. And I've watched some Jack White interviews, and the dude, God, Jack White is amazing. But the dude was like working in an upholstery shop, and then he just wrote these songs, I think, with this woman that he was dating and then married or whatever. I mean, just whatever. And that became the White Stripes. And, like, see, to me, I highly, highly doubt that Jack White thought, with my little, with my $300, bargain, or it's probably cheaper than that, with my, like, absolute POS beater guitar and my drummer who doesn't even know any fills, we're going to go take over the world. I mean, no one in their right mind would think that. He just wrote his songs. And I think that that's where a lot of the magic of the White Stripes came from, is the whole ethos of it was just, let's do it. Let's go. Let's write it, show up in a room. All right, we're writing 3 songs today. Probably write 3 songs. One of them's good. All right, we keep it. Put one microphone in the room, quick record, da-da-da-da-da. He's recording. Okay, it's done. He's done. You know what I'm saying? And like that, I think that in a way that the brilliance that Jack White has and that fearlessness that Jack White has, a lot of it comes from that mental game that he set up for himself, having the correct rules. The correct rules being noise is the standard of excellence. Like, excellence is not the standard of excellence. You know what I'm saying? I think everyone who loves music has an objective standard of like what you think is really good, right? It's like, well, I'm not going to sing a note unless I sound like Steven Tyler. Well, then you might never sing. And so, but you know, if you can start a band that you call a punk band, then people are like, oh, it's just, you know, it sounds like noise because it is. But within that medium, you are making art and you can progress and you can gain momentum and gain confidence and gain a body of work. I mean, that's what's really powerful too is if you have one of these projects, if you're able to create a project for yourself that you don't even think like, this isn't my main thing. I'm not a punk artist. I just have a punk band. I'm not a lo-fi artist. This is just my lo-fi project. I even think that you don't feel as bad like bearing your warts and all with people, you know? Like if I want to show someone something, I'm like, well, this is my punk band. So it's kind of shitty, all right? But it's supposed to be shitty, and just know that. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like there's a lot of freedom if you can introduce music like that to be people. Like yeah, you probably won't like this, but I'm going to play it for you anyways. It's got to be both things. I don't know. I find that that's very freeing. And I believe it's freeing based on the struggles I have faced for now a number of years, where internal and external resistance has, in Pressfield's language, kicked my ass. And so I think that is, that's it. So I'm going to play a song here at the end just to make sure that we get some music. But to put a little bow on this, well, actually, why don't we go ahead and go to the song and then I'll wrap it up afterwards. I think we'll get a nice hour in here. All right. So this song I'm going to play is an example of what I found very freeing in this what I call punk project. Now, this song is actually just like a rock and roll song in the like Chuck Berry vein, where it's just like a 3-chord blues thing, really. But that's the funny thing about punk is half of what punk is, right? Because when you look at its roots, early rock and roll diverged into basically Led Zeppelin style, like virtuosic anthem rock, like Boston, you know, and Black Sabbath. I mean, heavy blues. Like basically, there became all those kinds of bands, which we all love. But then it also became punk, and I wasn't there at the time, but it seems like punk and hard rock. It seems like you couldn't really like them both, right? You couldn't like the Misfits and Led Zeppelin, even though I think they both were producing music at relatively the same time. Or like you couldn't like the Sex Pistols or the Ramones and Led Zeppelin, you know? Because like, the Sex Pistols came out in 1977 and Zeppelin was winding down by then. You know, I think they broke up. I think Bonham died in 1980. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's very rare that there were people that were fans of both. But again, I wasn't there. But the cool thing in the internet era, and with enough time having passed, and particularly being of a different generation, is I have none of those loyalties. I get to just like it. And in fact, now you realize they both owned Marshall amplifiers and drum kits. Like they're actually more on the same team than anyone appreciated at the time. All right, so this song I'm going to play is like a faux blues song. And really, the whole reason I did it is because Hunter said that he liked this one. He sent me this punk song that he liked. And I was like, this isn't what I thought punk is. It just sounds like a rock and roll song. But I mean, rock and roll's amazing. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to take a whack at this. So here's a couple things to know before you listen to this. One, it's I don't have a lot of background in like playing real blues. Like I don't even know if I wrote a proper blues as far as like the number of bars and stuff like that. Like I know it's the 1-4-5 progression, but just keep that in mind. I don't know if I like even wrote a good blues. I don't know if you know what I'm saying? Like I don't know if I said, all right, this is just a jam. If I was at a jam and I said, all right, this next tune is just a blues in A. I don't know if this would even fit. You know, if some bass player badass was like rocking it out, I don't know if this would fit. So we'll see. But I did it anyways. It was fun. And the other thing I'll say real quick is I used the word early in the demo. I used the word archipelago. And that was one of the things that I thought was funny is, well, what if I put a 5-syllable word in this song? Archipelago. And so 5 syllables, like you just don't hear that very often. It's, you know, because most pop music and simple music, it isn't, you know, doesn't use that level of language. And so I just thought that was fun and funny. And it's kind of anti-blues, which again, to me is like a punk attitude, right? Like, well, fuck blues, fuck your blues, you know, this is my blues. This is how I do blues, which to me feels like it has a punk spirit. It feels like it's anti-authoritarian. And so that's why I felt kind of free to do this. Like, well, this is how I can do blues because I can't really do blues. All right. So this, and the topic of the song will hopefully be incredibly obvious. I will let you hopefully deduce what it is. We'll have a pop quiz after the song is done. But I will say that it's an unconventional subject for a blues. Without further ado. Well, I'm not an island, no archipelago. You see, I work as a duo. This you ought to know, 'cause I'm two to tango. You see, my better half, he lives down below. And at Bedline prime time, he'll put on a show, 'cause he's two to tango. All right, buddy, let's do a little dance. He'd be my caboose. If I flew a jet plane, I would call him Goose. Roger that, Maverick. Roll with us, you roll a deuce. Well, my dear old daddy taught me to have fun. He said a proper soldier always cleans his gun. I'll show you what Paul taught his son. Careful now, baby. The thing's loaded. It's a family heirloom. Baby, your coffee needs some cream. And my stir stick mushroom tip, he could make you scream. See, with us, we work as a team. Well, you can call him what you like, maybe even Bob. Yes, he loves the attention. He's a heartthrob. Boss lady, please give him the job. Please, 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 please. That was fun, wasn't it? Well, if you couldn't guess what that song was about, then I'll tell you. It was about my pet tarantula. Now, my favorite verses. I want to since I'm trying to help people talk about songs here. I have a few goals, I suppose, with the podcast. One, I want to lead by example, and I want to bear my freshly written raw demos for people. Like that was written 6 days ago, and I've only shown it to a few people, and it has no bass guitar, and I didn't really do any drums. I mean, it's just very minimalist, right? The thing with that song is I just thought it's a funny lyric delivery mechanism. And then, like I did a couple guitar noodles over the top of it. So I'll say, how did this song come about and why? Well, I will try and name those things off, and that will be sort of the tail end of our podcast here. So like I said, I was sent this link to this punk song by my buddy Hunter, and he said that I asked him, like, okay, so with this punk band, is there anything that you want it to sound like? And he's like, I don't really know. But he said, I know I like this. He sent me this song, and the song is, like I said, one of these kind of Chuck Berry influence things. And so I don't remember what the artist name was, and I'm sorry, Hunter, and I'm sorry to this artist. But anyways, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and how can I make this fun for me? And like I have already said a number of times now, I thought the punk rock thing to do was to take the style and make a joke out of it. Like, so that's kind of what I did. And let's see. My favorite verses turned out to be the jet plane verse. So I think that was the beginning of verse 2, where I said, if I had a jet plane, if I was a steam train, he'd be my caboose. If I flew a jet plane, I would call him Goose. And then I had this idea to have this other little voice do a response where he's like, Roger that, Maverick. And obviously, the joke would be like, that's that's my little partner talking back to me. Like, we have this close relationship where we talk to each other, and that just kind of cracks me up. Like, so that was one of those ideas where I had, quote, finished the song when that came to me. I was listening back to a version of it, my first draft of it, and that's when that came to me. And so I really got a kick out of that. I think that added a lot. And then probably my other favorite lyric was in verse 3 when it's like, now baby, 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 your coffee needs some cream, and my stir stick mushroom tip, it can make you scream, or he can make you scream. And that's disgusting. That is very raunchy. But I don't know, it's also just a funny combination of words and a funny image. Like, it makes you actually picture. It makes you it paints a vivid mental image of what that is. So, like, an actual stir stick of a phallus. I mean, that's just a hilarious image. So, anyways, I got a kick out of doing that. I don't know what the home is going to be for that song, but this might be it. It might just be a demo, and again, with this punk project, I don't know what the future is going to be, and I don't know if I'm ever going to put any time or money into any serious production for it. But even getting it to this point, it was a trip, and it was a lot of fun. And I hope that playing that song for you helps to illustrate, first of all, that there's a freedom in creating something that is not meant to be perfect, and just throwing it out there and releasing it in a beta version, to put it in tech terms, is very freeing, and just inherently creative and rewarding thing to do. And that it's open to anyone at any stage of their creative journey, and that it's one of the most effective tools to combat every creative's number one enemy, which would be resistance. All right. I think I'm going to sign off there. Upcoming podcasts are going to introduce you to my buddy Hunter. I'll eventually get him on here. And we're going to talk about some of these punk songs and play a few more of them for you. Some of them are really funny. And we'll also probably go back and we'll talk about Celia and maybe listen to some of that music. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But hopefully there's not going to be too many more of these solo podcasts, because even though I've been quite rambly with this one, I don't think I have that much to say in a solo format, because I think I said almost all of my thoughts on songwriting here. But who knows? Maybe I'll surprise myself with that too. So thank you for listening. I hope that there was something in here that, if nothing else, perhaps maybe you'll learn something new. And if you didn't, it reminded you of stuff you already knew. And that, as I go through life, seems to be the way knowledge actually works more often than not. Of like, oh, you're just reminded of truths that you already have heard at some point, but you just need more practice at them. So that's what the goal is here. And I'm going to sign off with that. Thank you for listening. Until next time. And I hope this will help you to tell your story.